By the way, let me just follow on that. If the kids actually think that they're involved in a site that has standards, then it raises the bar for the kids. I mean, independent of the parents. When I go into Yville and sit down and talk to them, I did a consulting thing for the Office of National Drug Control Policy, where they wanted me to talk to the director about kids online. And I went into Yville and said, let's talk about drugs. And the kids immediately whispered to me and said, don't do that, you'll get in trouble. Don't talk to us about drugs. For heaven's sake, someone might be watching, right? So the point is, if the kids know the standards, if the kids understand what the community is about and trust it and believe it, that goes a long ways towards having them actually behave the way you want to. Not 100%, but 91. I forget your name, but someone here runs Quest Atlantis, which is another online educational facility or on the internet. And another point, which she made in the audience, which you can make for yourself if you want, is that, for a business that runs an online service for kids, there's a significant cost involved in monitoring, which a lot of businesses don't want to pay. In our case, 1/3 of our employees are involved in monitoring the site. Well, you actually reduce your costs if you've built a system that reduces the need for considerable intervention. So it's a positive feedback, even in the behavior of the kids online with respect to your bottom line in managing the community, if in fact mostly the community is managing itself. So there's a business reason to do it beyond even the good reason to do it, which is sort of what you said.
Katie?
Yeah, and I think I'm off.
They'll take over. Yeah.
Okay.
Is she on?
There, thank you. I agree with that too, because a significant amount of money goes into not only COPPA compliance, right? It's a big, huge pain in the butt to make sure that you comply with COPPA. It took years for us to do it and to do it right. And in addition to the fact, the moderation, you're right, it's as far as a business goes, it's extremely expensive. It's time consuming. But what we're seeing is going from a site that moderates everything, all content, all posts, and people will ask, well, how do you scale that, right? That's not gonna be impossible one of these days when you have millions and millions of kids on your site and you can't keep up with, if one kid posts one picture, it's MySpace and Facebook have the same issues, that it's the viewing of the images to make sure that they're appropriate without technology in place to do it for you. But I'm seeing now, just as a general trend, that yes, we still look through every single piece of content, but we've also, and I don't have the data with me, but we also are seeing less that I actually have to moderate, because we've created a site based around community rules, based around good behavior, and we're not seeing a lot of that. So our moderation may be scalable just by the fact that kids are actually behaving because they're expected to do so and they're told to do so.
Anybody else? Robin, is this the last panel today?
This is the last panel.
All right, so you know what I think we should all do? Do you have one more question?
I do. So
Okay.
right at the same time in town here in New York was Games for Change. And Games for Change was about using gaming to change behaviors. And it struck me that this is anything but Games for Change, that can you use kids' entertainment to modify behavior, and if you can, is it Skinnerian, or is that a good thing? Should we be looking at that? So should they get points for staying safe and demerits when they don't, is the way to...
Hey guys, can you please be quiet? You two in the front row.
It comes up all the time when you look at loyalty programs or point programs and so on as incentives. And I know you have me points, and within Ohanarama we have tokens and neuros. There will be folks who say you should not be incenting children to learn. You shouldn't be giving them points to do these certain things and so on. But the reality is, I grew up, I got money for a good report card. I got things, if you just look at it in a different world, incentives are all over the place. Gamification is everywhere. The question is that the only thing that you're doing to drive? If it is hollow rewards, then that's something that's different, right? But I think incentives are a part of life in many different ways. It's how you use them.
I mean, think about what we did. We showed up because we knew we were going to get freebies and things like that, and when we walk around the floor and pens.
And in Wyville, if you behave badly, it hurts your credit rating. And if you have a bad credit rating, it turns out you can't get a loan to buy a Scion to drive around the site. By the way, if you don't pay your car loans on time, you also get hit on your credit rating, and that's life. Yeah. So I think, yeah.
One last question, and then you can all have one. But so to Sprint and Verizon, as a parent, you can now track your child through life, know where they are at any given moment, know if they made a left turn instead of a right, if they said they're going to Sally's or not. How do you deal with that as a parent, and what are you doing to kind of help parents figure out whether they should have their kid on an electronic leash?
Well, there's, in the way that we design those services, first and foremost, there's a mutual opt-in that needs to occur. So I think it's important to understand that this isn't some sort of abstract private surveillance or something like that. We see that working in several classes. The simplest one is a safety tool, which is to just track, has my kid arrived at the proper destination? And that's just the replication of a behavior we've all done. I certainly did as parents. When I grew up, it was my neighbor Ken's mom calling my mom up saying Jack got to Ken's house, they're in the pool. And so it's just a surrogate for that activity. As you move along, and as kids move along, they move on to tracking where one another is, more so than where they are. And the analogy of the power button becomes pretty strong because kids just turn stuff off if they don't like it. So there's a balance there. And if products are going to be useful, if they're going to be adopted and they're going to be used, and this ties into the comments that the two of you were making, consumers have to trust them. And so if they're delivered in such a way that either the parent doesn't trust them or the kid doesn't trust them, they're not going to work. And no one's going to adopt them, and they'll just go away. So I think the primary use case there is for parents tracking younger kids to make sure they're arriving safely at whatever destination they're going to get to. And all of the other elements of location services, generally speaking, are adults opting in to get some sort of a value exchange for their location, whether that's marketing or finding a friend or not finding a friend, or maybe the dating analogy or whatever. That's what those get used for.
Can I say something about your previous conversation? Just so there are 120 different countries in Wyville. We get email from people in Brazil saying, don't force your crazy American attitudes on us. So one of the things that's interesting about the internet, right, is that it isn't just Americans. And viewed from most of the rest of the world, some of the insanity of the US with respect to some of these issues is just regarded as bizarre, dangerous, and unfriendly. So in managing on the internet sites like this or technology, you got to be aware that you're crossing multiple cultures. And there's a legitimate argument that, the Brazilians make a legitimate argument that they don't see much reason to follow our model, given the consequences of our model.
What are those instances? I'm not familiar.
Well, for example, the language allowed in Wyville is roughly 1950. Okay? And in fact, if you listen to the radio even, you can get nastier stuff that kids listen to on the radio than they can actually say in Wyville. And does that make sense? From the point of view of parents looking over our shoulders, or regulators, or whatever, it makes sense as a company for us to do that. Does it make sense to kids? Does it make sense to people in Brazil that aren't used to being so strange about some of the things that we won't let our kids talk about?
Or even just topless photos. Very simple.
So here's something that I think you can be, I think, 184 countries in the world, or whatever it is, or 230. Who knows how many countries there are in the world? There's America. No, but who really knows? 230, right? 230 something countries in the world. The reality is, if no matter what country you are in, if you asked yourself 2 questions, then much of what you do isn't going to be a debate of any panel. because it wouldn't cause a problem. And the number one thing you should put on your computer screen, and this is my takeaway to you, is a question. If I send it, am I okay with seeing it in the middle of Times Square or whatever city that is the center of your world that you would or would not want to see it in? And the bottom of the screen, should I do this or say this, and would I want somebody to do the same to me? Another way of saying, do unto others what you want them to do to you. And I'm Hindu, and I still get that, okay? But those are the two things I would give you as a takeaway. And at this point, I see red wine and white wine in the back. I think everyone should stand up and give these guys a standing ovation.